Doctor, but how can you be so sure you're gonna get Spider-Man No Way Home tickets? I hear those things are gonna be impossible to get.
All right, you are. Now let me introduce my assistants. To use these arms in an environment no human hand could enter. And now on to the main event. Give me the blue light, Rosie. Precious tritium. I'd like to thank Harry Osborn and Oscorp Industries for providing it.
Happy to pay the bills, Otto.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Keep calm. It's only a spike. It'll soon stabilize. What are you doing? Pulling the plug.
No! I miscalculated.
Hello Spider-Man fans, continuing on the road to Spider-Man No Way Home, we move on now to Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 of 2004. I already gave you my thoughts on the first Spider-Man movie and how that film solidified my love for Spider-Man. So in 2004, when they wanted to come out with a sequel to that first Spider-Man movie, because of the giant success that it was, I was a Spider-Man fan to the fullest. You think I'm committed now in this costume and all these toys around me? Oh, take a look at this. That's right. I was the coolest kid on the block. Not only am I playing Yu-Gi-Oh! With my stepbrother, peep the Spider-Man chair with the Spider-Man bed covers, you can't also forget the Spider-Man 2 action figures of Tobey Maguire and Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus. I was as cool as could be, man. Hey, yo, but why the heck do I have a sock right there? But with Spider-Man 2 from 2004, it's widely regarded as being the best Spider-Man movie ever made. Well, the best live-action Spider-Man movie ever made. And I don't think they'd be wrong in thinking that, because there is so much this movie does right that it's unbelievable we got a Spider-Man film like this. So as always, remember, these are just my opinions and thoughts on Spider-Man 2. I'd love to hear your experience and your thoughts on this movie. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the Columbia lady while we hit play on Spider-Man 2 from 2004. As always, Sam Raimi knows exactly how to open up this movie, and with the opening credits, they add the special little touch of red lights, retelling you the events from the previous Spider-Man movie with some Alex Ross art. As far as comic book artists go, I am a huge fan of Alex Ross, so this was a great little touch for them to kind of recap the movie for you, segueing us into, of course, a narration by Tobey Maguire that is only done in the beginning and the end of these Spider-Man movies, where we find Peter Parker trying to make a living as a pizza delivery boy, us the audience finding out from Mr. Aziz that he's not very good at balancing both Spider-Man and his job.
It's late, huh?
I'm sorry, Mr. Aziz. There was a disturbance.
Disturbance, another disturbance. Oh, there's a disturbance.
And that's essentially the theme for Spider-Man 2, is how Peter Parker struggles to find that balance between being Peter Parker and Spider-Man. An imbalance that is perfectly summed up in the first 5 minutes of this movie, where Peter has the task to deliver these pizzas, or
Well, your ass is fired.
Peter realizing that in his regular form it's not something he'd be able to accomplish. Maybe if you take the bridge, Peter.
Get the hell out of here!
Alright, never mind, screw the bridge, plan B.
Whoa! He stole that guy's pizza!
Changing himself into Spider-Man, making the task a lot easier, but like, I know that's a little throwaway joke of the guy thinking that Spider-Man stole this guy's pizza, but that's also a theme that's in this movie about citizens in New York having the wrong idea of Spider-Man, and in the very next shot, Spider-Man can't even use the advantage of having these superpowers to deliver these pizzas because he's got a responsibility to save the city, including these damn kids. It's just so insane to me how good the writing is in Spider-Man 2 that in the first 5 minutes, you establish all those things, and now the rest of the movie can be enjoyed with other stuff.
Pizza time.
Damn right, pizza time. And one thing I want to mention off to the side that I didn't mention in my review for the first Spider-Man movie is how damn gorgeous the Sam Raimi Spider-Man suit is. One, because it's obviously common sense and all of you know. In fact, I think most of you would have the Sam Raimi suit as #1 on your list. But I didn't mention it on purpose because the movie has the option to change the suit if they like. And while they do tweak it up where they change the spider emblem a little bit and shift the colors around, they decided to keep it the same because that's as perfect as a suit as you can get. But now that Sam Raimi knows knows he has a franchise on his hands, he does what he should in the second movie, and that's do a little world building where we see some more struggles that Peter is facing, like going to college, encountering one of his professors, Dr. Connors. Now, I need you to be honest with me, because even 12-year-old me did not know that is supposed to be the Dr. Connors that would eventually become the Lizard. Hell, I never even knew he was missing an arm until years later where other fans pointed it out. And it's this kind of world building that I love, that these characters are out there, they exist, and they're just ticking time bombs before they become villains. Sadly, this will be one we never get to fully see. But now that the movie has shown us a little bit of Peter's imbalanced life, we get to see him interacting with some of the side characters and what they've been up to. On a day that also happens to be Peter Parker's birthday that he forgot. That to me really shows you just how busy Spider-Man is, that he's surprised that it's his own birthday and didn't even realize it. But some of the things we find out is Mary Jane's career in acting is starting to take off with getting some shows on Broadway. And even though it appears that Harry is there in support of Peter, there is some underlying tension with Harry knowing that Peter takes pictures of Spider-Man and he still has a vendetta out to get him for the death of his father. All things that are a planting of the seed that'll come into play in the next movie, but one scene in particular that I paid no mind to as a kid, probably because I couldn't comprehend the idea of what foreclosure meant. But this scene between Peter and his Aunt May at the end of his birthday party where he asks her, is she okay financially, because now she's left by herself in this house to take care of the bills and all that without Uncle Ben around. And even though this is Aunt May's problem, you just know Peter also feels responsible but can't help out in any form because he could barely pay the bills of his own.
Here, kiddo, happy birthday. You need it more than I do.
No, I can't take that.
Yes, you can. You can take this money from me. For God's sake, it's not much. Now take it. And don't you dare leave it here.
Like, I don't know about you, but now seeing this as an adult who has had to struggle paycheck to paycheck, sometimes not knowing how I'm gonna make certain payments for stuff that is due, this right here hits home. It's just a perfect reason why I love the Sam Raimi version of Spider-Man and how they deal with the consequences of Peter's life in being Spider-Man. It's not all happy and woos. Maybe sometimes woos, but the pains of balancing a superhero life aren't over just yet, because now we see what happens since Peter rejected MJ by the end of the first movie. She has attempted to move on and is now seeing someone else. And as a side note, I just want to say them Tobey Maguire memes have just ruined my rewatchability of some of these movies, because like, how was this ever a correct way to respond to what Mary Jane said?
I liked seeing you tonight, Peter.
Oh boy, yeah.
Next time someone says they're happy to see you, just say,
Oh boy, yeah.
I don't know if that's realistic, but something that damn for sure is realistic is Peter Parker's apartment in this movie. I think anybody who has spent some time in New York will tell you that is how most apartments look like, and for a man who gets fired from every other job and is just working freelance randomly with the Daily Bugle, this would be the exact apartment a broke college student would be having, and even the landlord there probably matches the description.
You're a month late again.
I promise as soon as I...
If promises were crackers, my daughter would be fat.
All I got is this 20 for the rest of the week. I need that money.
But 20 minutes into Spider-Man 2, we get to meet the villain of the film, and that is Dr. Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina. Peter using the connection of Harry to meet Otto Octavius because he's writing a paper on him. And as far as Spider-Man villains go, I think Dr. Octopus was one of the best fleshed out villains who didn't come off one-dimensional at all. I love the idea of him having this love interest and a scientist who truly wants to do good for the world, even though I think you could easily nitpick a little bit with Dr. Octopus's motivations here, because his goal as a scientist is to create this endless supply of energy, and in taking the steps to make that a reality, he created these 4 limbs with artificial intelligence where no one even explains to me what is powering those arms and do they ever run out of battery. Is Dr. Octopus walking around with a plug always connected to an outlet? Like, I think of the capabilities of this technology of mechanical arms you can control with your mind and how useful that would be to people who are dealing with paralysis, and it's like nuclear fusion, sun, in the palm of my hands. But like with any mad scientist, his plans don't go accordingly, not only corrupting the chip that puts him in charge of the mechanical arms, but killing the love of his life in the process. Dying in a pretty horrific way, if I do say so myself. And that should make sense, because we still have Sam Raimi here as the director, and the boy loves him his cheesy and campiness in Spider-Man.
I'm ruined. I have nothing left except Spider-Man.
He saved your lives, sir.
He humiliated me by touching me.
but does not forget to add at least one scene that you think is pulled straight out of a horror movie, and that's exactly what he did here with Dr. Octopus in this hospital scene. The way the tentacle arms are now in control and they start killing off one by one every doctor in this room. I was pretty terrified watching this as a kid, just seeing the one person who's dragging her fingernails across the floor. Subtle little details like that just make this movie chef's kiss. And I guess on the topic here of details that are thrown in so subtly yet I love a lot are one, after Dr. Octopus starts showing up in the city, we of course get the great Easter egg of Sam Raimi mentioning another Marvel superhero,
Doctor Strange.
That's pretty good, but it's taken.
And who would have known that would mean so much more in the future where Sam Raimi is actually directing a Doctor Strange film. But it's this moment here where Peter comes in to be told, why don't you have any pictures of this new villain out there and Spider-Man? And comic book character Robbie Robertson says,
Mad scientist goes berserk and we don't have pictures.
I heard Spider-Man was there.
Where were you? Photographing?
I don't know about you, but to me that lets me know this dude knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And even though that's a storyline that never really gets explored or expanded upon, I just kind of like that little subtlety thrown in there, especially with a character pulled straight from the comics who's always on Spider-Man's side and trying to debate Jay Jonah about this guy not being a menace to the city. So much to damn love with Spider-Man 2, but let me take a little bit of a break from praising this movie and talk about something not that I necessarily hate, but I am rather mixed on to this day with Spider-Man 2. One of the main bases of this movie, with Peter having to deal with the imbalance of being Spider-Man and Peter Parker, is Sam Raimi decides to adapt the story Spider-Man No More, where all the struggles of being Spider-Man kind of finally pile up to Peter, where he just wants to quit. And I love how it's not just giant things like Peter losing the love of his life to an astronaut, or Aunt May being denied refinancing for her house to help out with some of those bills. It's like a bunch of little small things that do eventually add up.
Get it done, or I'm failing you.
Miss Watson, she's a friend of mine. She asked me to come.
But not to come late.
All really good setup for the No More storyline in here, but the thing I could just never really get behind is the fact that Peter can just turn off the ability of being Spider-Man psychologically. This was, I guess, Sam Raimi's way of working around the fact that they decided not to include the web shooters into Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. It was something they thought about doing in the first movie, to where I think there's even a deleted scene of Tobey Maguire using web shooters, but they just thought it was unrealistic that a teenage kid could come up with that technology, so they just made it organic instead. So in the Sam Raimi movies, we kind of lose that characteristic trait of Peter running out of web to the fact that he has to use his other abilities to overcome that.
Oh no, come on!
Even from 9 years old to this day, I still think that's kind of a dumb little throwaway that he can just think, I don't want to be Spider-Man, so now he's weak, loses his superhero abilities, can't shoot webs, has to wear glasses again. It's just a little annoyance I have with this movie, but it also goes to show you, when you make a good movie with a very focused storyline and characters that matter and are fleshed out, gripes like that can be ignored and thrown away, because I like what comes after that. Once he does give up being Spider-Man, having that dream sequence of telling Uncle Ben, I don't want to be Spider-Man anymore, recreating that iconic comic book cover art, and just the little happy montage we get of Peter getting to live a normal life. Who doesn't love seeing a happy Peter Parker and him swallowing a hot dog as the city of New York ends up in flames? I was one of those saps who saw the movie as a kid, and whenever this freeze frame came up in Spider-Man 2, my heart kind of sank and went, oh my god, is this the end of the movie? Is he really giving up Spider-Man? I don't know if that was intentional, but damn you, Sam Raimi. But now that Peter Parker's given up Spider-Man, all his problems should be solved, but he comes to realize, yo, having a normal life sucks just as much, even if you don't have the baggage of being a superhero. Like Peter thinking he could just get back together with MJ now that he's just regular Peter Parker, but that doesn't work out because he's still saying lines that don't make sense.
I'm different. Punch me, I bleed.
Like, yes, obviously I know that line makes sense to us, the audience watching the movie, because now we realize he's not Spider-Man. But to MJ, she's just like, what? I want to punch you, bruh. If anybody wanted to punch Peter, it was definitely Aunt May after Peter finally told her how Uncle Ben really died. Like, Aunt May has some pretty good reasons for wanting to smack Peter around. She also ditched him at the bank.
Peter? Don't leave me.
See you, chump.
So like, if it wasn't enough to have amazing character development, a great adapted storyline in here from the comics, what else did Sam Raimi do in Spider-Man 2 that was the most iconic thing? The damn action sequences, man. I believe to this day that the action sequences in Spider-Man 2 hold up. Even if we get a little PlayStation 2 graphics thrown in here and there, some people still make fun of the way Doc Ock looks in some of the Spider-Man No Way Home trailers, but the boy looks that way in here too. Most of the big action sequences are kicked off when Dr. Octopus makes a deal with Harry Osborn that in exchange of delivering Spider-Man to him, Harry will deliver to him
Precious tritium.
throwing in a little character detail that I like, that even though Harry is kind of pissed with Peter right now, not letting him know where Spider-Man is.
Isn't that right? Huh? Isn't that right? Huh, brother?
When he sends Doc Ock to go after them, he still makes sure to say,
Don't hurt Peter!
letting you know he still cares about Peter. Bringing us to the cafe where Peter's dealing with the moral dilemma if he can kiss the woman who's engaged. Doc Ock making that choice super easy by throwing a car in there, which doesn't really make sense why Doc Ock would do that. As far as he knows, Peter is human. If that car would have hit him, it would have killed him. Then how the hell would he have gotten the information of who Spider-Man is? But like I said, when you have a good movie with good characters and good story points, you kind of just ignore some of those little gripes. Doc Ock kidnapping MJ, forcing Peter Parker to return as Spider-Man, and man does he get one glorious return. Because can we take a second to appreciate this damn swinging and transition? Bringing us to what some believe is the most iconic Spider-Man versus a villain fight. Sometimes I hate when movies really cut the battle between the villain and the hero so short, but Sam Raimi gives you so much to enjoy here. Sounding like a broken record here where you can make the argument that Spider-Man's punches should be able to knock out Dr. Octopus and put him in a coma, but you ignore all of that because this battle manages to have so many great surprises while also using all of Spider-Man's abilities, his strength, his speed, agility, his spider senses with dodging some of those attacks. I really think there's only one other Spider-Man battle that has come as close as to topping this one, and I will reveal it whenever I get to that movie and that fight scene. But I gotta call it like it is and say this is my favorite Spider-Man villain sequence in the entire franchise, because not only do you get a great boss battle between Spider-Man and a villain, you also have to have him coming up with ways to save this moving train that is headed for disaster, really showing you Peter's thinking process into doing something that might work, but then failing, doing something else, and then succeeding, and the city of New York having his back. Bringing us to the finale of Spider-Man 2, where Harry learns the identity of Spider-Man, that it's his best friend, and even with this realization, him putting MJ as a priority into saving her, telling Peter exactly where Doc Ock is. And that's what I'll admit, that was my other little gripe with Spider-Man 2. I don't like it when this many people know Spider-Man's identity. Harry, now MJ, those random people on the train, even Robbie Robertson, damn, keep a secret identity, bruh. I love Spider-Man having to keep a secret identity, and every time it's revealed, I just die a little inside. Just wait till you see me get murdered at the end of Far From Home. But it does bring us to the concluding arc of Dr. Octopus here, where he realizes what he was doing is that the corruption of these tentacles kind of taking over him, semi-mirroring the relationship that Green Goblin had with his goblin side, only this time I think it was actually better explained why he was going bad, overcoming the tentacles and deciding to sacrifice himself for the greater good.
I will not die a monster.
Making us all very curious how they're going to explain Dr. Octopus now wanting to beat up Tom Holland's Spider-Man in No Way Home. Bringing us to a rarity in the Sam Raimi trilogy where the movie kind of ends on a happy note, where even though we do get the tease that Harry Osborn will now take up the mantle of Green Goblin, MJ decides to leave her fiance for Peter, fully being aware of how dangerous it could be to date him, but letting love triumph, proving she's okay with the double life once Peter has to head out the door to go save somebody, saying,
Go get him, Tiger.
And one of the only moments I enjoyed this version of MJ when she says that iconic line. Ending the film off on a very iconic final swing with helicopters headed to wherever Spider-Man needs to be. Spider-Man 2 to me is as perfect as it gets when it comes to Spider-Man dealing with consequences and balancing his double life while also trying to get things that make him happy. And honestly, the real tragedy here is this would be the last Spider-Man movie that most fans would agree upon being great, as from here on out, the live action movies, people will have a spectrum of opinions. Some will agree with, other opinions you guys might think I'm crazy and want to take away my Spider-Man fan card. But let me know your guys' opinions on Spider-Man 2 from 2004. Is it a movie that you think lives up to the glory of being considered one of the best Spider-Man movies? I'd also very much like to hear about the things you don't like about this movie, since we already know so much about why people do like it. Either way, be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next review in the Spider-Man series. Take care.